We're at the final session now, so thank you all for staying, and actually you're growing in numbers rather than reducing in numbers, so that's always very impressive. This is the last session for today, day one, and so far everything's worked, so I hope that will continue for this session, and we're going to talk about geographic and spatial analyses. Can all the people who are online please type their full names so that when you ask questions we know who you are, and of course, as with all the previous sessions, we please ask you to respect the speakers and to behave in a professional manner. Before we start, I just wanted to tell you that the Policy Press are the Bristol University Press have made an offer for all conference participants in person or online to give you a minimum of 50% off their books if you order before the end of the September using the code BUP09 if you're ordering online, or if you just want to go outside to order from the stand there. And you'll be sent an email with those details as well. But they have several hundred books, which I'm sure many of them will be of interest to everybody in this room and the people participating in this conference. So I'd like to thank them for that. We have 4 speakers in this session, and we only have a short time, so I'm going to keep strictly to 15 minutes. The first talk is on provincial to national unlock the value of the mix in Pakistan and meta-analyses of the mix. And the second talk is also about Pakistan. For those of you who don't know, UNICEF in Pakistan enjoy producing the mix so much that instead of doing just one survey like most countries, they do 4 or 5 surveys for every single round, one for each province and for Pakistan administered Kashmir. So it is probably, and I do work with UNICEF Pakistan, so I'm biased, arguably the best mix survey of any country in the world. So please, can you come and talk?
All right, thank you so much. So this is Ashraf Mrabat. I'm Data Analytics Manager, UNICEF Pakistan. I'm really delighted to be here at University of Bristol to present this piece of paper. This is very initial draft of the work that we want to do. I have as co-authors for this my colleague Fatah Ad-Din Ahmed. He should be participating online. He's data analytics specialist. And I have also Manar Abdurrahman. She's based in Qatar, working for University of Qatar. So as I said, we started to think about this last year on how we're going to use the different data that come in from the different provincial mix surveys and come up with a national estimate. Of course, in UNICEF, we have a lot of things to do. This has been left behind since last year. And then the mixed conference came as a trigger for us. So we said, let's get started and come up with something that at least we start for something, and then we're going to improve it and mature it with the time. A little of background for this piece of paper. So basically, Pakistan, like the other or most of the countries in the world, showed more strong commitment for the achievement of the SDG indicators. We are saying that this was maybe on the top 5 of countries who committed to the SDG indicators. The same for the child rights, where the ratification of the Child Rights Convention was in 1990. We have made certain data gap analysis in South Asia and basically in Pakistan. And we come up with some alarming results. There were a lot of gaps in terms of reporting of the SDG indicators, unfortunately. We didn't show examples, but we have some example for some indicators. It's like for 1 decade, we only have 1 data point for an indicator. So if you want to implement SDGs, I think you need to have more data points to be able to monitor the SDG, and more specifically, the children-related, SDG children-related indicators. As Dave has mentioned about the mix program in Pakistan, we have 4 provinces in Pakistan. Each province conducted a mixed multiple indicator cluster survey with different frequency. Some of them, they are more frequent. They conduct or implement the mixed surveys every 3-4 years. The others every 5 years. So the frequency differs from country or from province to province. The data used at the provincial level, one of the assets of having mixed provincial is that we collect the data at the level of the district, meaning that we'll be able to generate information about the situation of children and women at the level of the district, which is very helpful in terms of resource allocation and planning of certain interventions that are more localized. Why we are doing this? Basically, if we look at what we have as data sources in Pakistan, we have the mixed surveys that are conducted, implemented in each province with the level of district, as I said. At the same time, we do have implementation of large-scale surveys at the level of the nation, like the DHS. When you go to Pakistan and look for the DHS, you're going to find the DHS implemented many times, 3 times so far. But the issue is that they only generate information or produce estimates at the level of province. So we don't have the information at district level for certain DHS. We do have as well what we call the Pakistan PMMS, which is the Pakistan Maternal Mortality Survey. That also is a bit frequent in Pakistan. It is also another data source that is used in Pakistan. So we have that. The issue is that for those both surveys, there are certain information that are lacking mainly related to the children. This is one part of the story. The second part, if we go to the mix, as I said, we have a frequent implementation of the mixed surveys. You can say every other year you will find a mixed surveys dissemination event in one of the provinces, right? So over the decade or 30 years, we already had done 15 surveys. The issue is that we have that we don't have like optimization of the use of the data, of the mixed data. It's underutilized. This is our perception, but also evidence has showed that it's not used at the level of the national. This is the gap that we are trying to address here. Gaps at national estimate. At the same time, we should be able to generate what we call SDG localized. So we've been able to generate some SDG indicator at the level of the province, but it's not at the national level, and this is not helping the country as a country to report. If you go to the VNR, the last voluntary national report, you will not find for certain indicators some reporting on the children SDG indicators. So the first thing that came to our mind is that how can we use this provincial mixed data and be able to come up with the estimate at the national level? So we looked at the different methods that we have. We thought about having this, what we call the pooled estimates, right? So we tried to look at certain articles and paper, given also the short time that we had. And we said, let's try to see. We saw some examples talking about having an estimate coming from nationals to regional. At the same time, we saw that for some countries, I can mention, for example, Yemen, where there were 2 estimates coming from 2 mix. And at the end, we come up with a number, one number for Yemen. So there were 2 mix, one of them in the north, one of them on the south. At the same time, we've been able to manage to have an estimate that would kind of reflect the situation of children in the entire country. So this was the rationale. The objectives were clear. We started for the meta-analysis. I think the title was not updated. We didn't only do a meta-analysis, but we're going to see what we did. So the objectives that we have is, first of all, to generate a pooled estimate, right, for certain indicator that we picked and choose some of them. At the same time, we thought about generating estimate from what we called a pooled data, meaning that we put all the 4 surveys that we have. We're going to talk about the data sources that we use, but pull it, append the data sets, and come up with one estimate. And then we try to compare, right, to see where we are in terms of the difference. So we have the meta-analysis outcomes, and we have what we call estimate coming from the pooled data. And then we have the source that we're going to try not to validate, but to compare, which are the DHS and PMMS. So this is what we wanted to do. So as data, we looked at what we have as SDG indicators. So we looked on what we want to compare first. We started from there. We said if we want to compare with DHS, we need to make sure that we select the indicators that come in or generated by the DHS or PMMS. So there were around 29 or 30 indicators. And then for certain reasons and other reasons, we try to choose other indicators that have different denominators. So we picked the skilled birth attendant, we picked contraceptive prevalence rate, exclusive breastfeeding, and other indicators like overweight and stunting. And then we looked at what we have as data source. So as you say, Dave, this was the only national mixed survey, the one in 1995. We considered this as 1995. Of course, the mixed program was different from what we have now. But at that time, there were kind of agreement to consider this as national. Then after that, all of them are provincial, right? So what we consider here is these 4 surveys. The Punjab 2017-19, the Sindh, the KP, and Baluchistan. I hope that you are familiar with the name of provinces. By the way, I didn't want to put a map. Because the map in Pakistan, I have some bad experience already, so they told me next time we're not going to forgive you. So I stopped. So this is, but I mean, feel free to Google it and see the map of Pakistan, at least to be familiar with the country. We consider Punjab, Sindh, Baluchistan, and KP, and you see the window that we start our estimate or our data set. We started from 2017, right, to 20. Almost 4 years. Keep this in mind. At the same time, we put the 2 national household surveys that we want to compare, the DHS and PMMS. All right? At the same time, we wanted to give you also an overview of what is coming next, which is the Punjab 24 and the Sindh 24-25. So these kind of the indicators and the data source that we used. So we use different statistical methods. As I said, the first one was to look at the meta-analysis. So we performed what we call random effects models, right? We use the forest plots. I'm going to share with you the results of this generated. And also we look at heterogeneity across the different estimates. At the same time, as I said, the second was like to append all the provincial mixed surveys together. We recalculate the indicators, and we denormize the weights, and we used the 2017 census for that. At the same time, we try to compare, or to look at where the confidence interval were overlapping, and also try to compare, as I said, with the different estimates coming from the national surveys. We use data and spaces for this exercise. So we try to show you this, as I said, very initial results. So this is the result for the different indicators. I'm going to try to show all of them for the time being. And we'll try to comment one of them, right, to see how it went. So if you looked at the skilled birth attendant, so we have the different, you academia, you called study, we called survey there. This is the 4 estimates or surveys that we have, the studies. So we have 4. And we come up with what we call the theta there, which is the estimate. So for the case of the skilled birth attendant, is around 75. But you see that, for example, in Baluchistan, that estimate is 67. So if you look at heterogeneity, it's very high for almost all of them, right? So what we know is that if you have this heterogeneity high, meaning that your pooled estimate or the meta-analysis that you did is not that robust. So this is mainly the results. If we look to all of them, what we saw, what we came up with, that for all indicators, the 8 indicators that we picked, the heterogeneity was very high. Of course, we need to pay attention and try to understand why this heterogeneity is high. We're going to try to comment this as well. So the indicators, as I said, contraceptive prevalence rate, overweight, access to electricity, and INC, antenatal care visits. As you may see as well that there are some certain confidence interval. You see it for Baluchistan, for example, for the case of overweight, where we are in terms of the overweight. Now we try to compare, and here we're going to try to see, as I said, the pooled estimates, which is the outcome of the meta-analysis, the estimates from the pooled data, and we have the 2 national surveys that we used. So if we consider the access to electricity, you see that, first of all, the estimates are close to each other, right? For almost all indicators except some of them. I'm going to comment certain estimates. So if we see the estimate coming from the pooled data, as I said, in average, every mixed survey or provincial mixed survey in Pakistan, the sample size is around 50,000, right? So if you if you append them, you're going to have kind of 200,000 households. And that's why you see the estimates that are more robust. The confidence of interval is a bit narrow. It's not larger if you look at the yellow one, the yellow bars everywhere, right? Comparing to what is coming from the pooled estimates. I hope that I'm on time. I don't know who is monitor. All right. I don't want to see your red card. You don't have a blue one. All right. So what we have as a summary here is that the pooled estimate from the meta-analysis, as I said, had a large CI. The high heterogeneity here. We're still thinking to what we need to do, maybe sensitivity, but the idea is also the heterogeneity may come from the difference that exists across the provinces. The only thing that we may be a bit sure is that is not coming from the study design, right? Because the mix, we have the standard methods that are applied in all the mixed surveys. So the difference are coming from maybe some social macroeconomic variables in this province. And if you take, for example, any outcome indicators like infant mortality and try to compare across the whole, you will see that there are big difference, for example, between Punjab, which is a province that is almost half of the country in terms of population, and a province like Baluchistan. But it should not be coming from the design of the mixed surveys. So, as we said, sensitivity analysis can be done as well to just drop one and regenerate the estimates. At the same time, if you're going to do that, we're going to find ourselves with 3 studies, which also make our results a bit weak. This is what we were saying. As we said, the CI was a bit narrow from the pooled data because of the sample size when you append the different data sets. So we said that it's comparable, right? Between the different estimate, the pooled estimate and the estimate from pooled data, and also comparable with the national household surveys or estimates coming from national household surveys. They were overlapping, as I said, for different or for some indicators, mainly, as I said, the skilled birth attendant and the standing and overweight. As a conclusion, we can say that heterogeneity from the meta-analysis may represent some genuine variation between provinces rather than methodological artifact. This is what we said, as we are using the same methodology. For the meta-analysis, since we've seen kind of high heterogeneity, we need to be careful on how we're going to use that, because there may be some sources of, or potential sources of bias. The difference for both might stem from the fact that DHS and provincial survey were not conducted simultaneously at the same time. This is something very important to stop a bit on it. As we said, there is a window of 4 years that we use, starting from the Punjab as the first one, 2017-18, to the last one. We are comparing that window with the DHS in 2017-18. So the fact for some indicators that would also require some reference period is like we are comparing 2 indicators that doesn't have the same reference period. So that difference can also be explained by that. For us, we think that this provincial mixed surveys has the potential to fill the gaps. And here the idea is, first of all, we wanted to compare between what DHS or other national household surveys is generating and what mix provincial mix has. If we validate that the estimate coming from provincial mix would bring a robust estimate, then we'll be able even to consider information that is not collected by the DHS, right? And try to come up with estimate through the mix and present it based on what we're going to validate or to compare. So this is the idea. The good thing in this initial work is that it's coming from the government, by the way. There is a need to have an estimate at the national level for the SDG. So for us, if we come up to produce a strong estimate, this would be used directly by the government. This is something that I wanted to say at the end, Mr. Dave. I'm done. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next talk is, I'm going to go through all the talks first before you can ask questions. The next talk, again, is on Pakistan, about spatial heterogeneity and determinants of diarrhea amongst the under 5s in Pakistan. A really very important subject.
Hi, I'm Ömer Ünsal from Istanbul University. I finished my PhD last year in Istanbul University. We researched diarrhea prevalence on the Pakistan districts using mixed data sets and some global data sets with Munazza Fatima from South Punjab, Bahawalpur University. We want to show some numbers about deaths. Approximately Bristol population passed away using due to the diarrhea in globally. Our purpose spotlight geographical differences in the determinants of under 5 diarrhea case across districts in Pakistan. I want to show you some information about Pakistan. 230 million people in the Pakistan. Population growth rate of the 2% per year. And an estimated 70% of households still drinks bacterially contaminated water, unfortunately. We used mostly mixed data sets, diarrhea among under 5 year, population density, rural population from census records, episodes of fever, ARI, premature birth, open stool, children's vitamin A supplementation, salt iodization, breastfeed, and mean temperature. Actually, we used 38 variables for our analysis. We found best model using these variables. We selected only 10 variables in our models. We tried approximately 30 MGWR models in this paper. The left side, the classical spatial distribution map of the diarrhea in Pakistan districts. The right side, the hotspot or cold spot maps using confidence levels. This is our covariates distributions. We applied 4 or 5 stages for the paper, 38 different variables that may affect under 5 diarrhea case. In the second stage, we used GLR method. Before this method, we used exploratory regression method for the best model. We used ArcGIS Pro software for the best selection best model. This method reveals as the direction of the relationship between the dependent variable and independent variable. The MGWR or GWR based methods can represent or can reveal geographical distributions or heterogeneities of the relationships. In the third stage, we used a global Moran's eye tool or method for the clustering structure of clustering or currency of the clustering. In the fourth stage, we used MGWR method to overcome the clustering problem that occurs in the GLR model residuals. Also, we applied GWR. Similarity GWR is this newest method in 2024, and MGWR results. We compared them. In the last step, fifth step, we variate maps using ArcGIS Pro software. We have 3 limitations about level. Unfortunately, we only have a district level, and we couldn't find any prior study for Pakistan. We couldn't discuss our findings in the paper. We find another country findings. Third, the data, as you can see, we used different years for the variables. This is our GLR model results. Adjusted R-square 0.73 and AIC 1040. These values indicate that the GLR regression residuals have a normal distribution. And we found all variables as significantly. For example, children vitamin A has a negative relationship. Breastfeed has a positive relationship. population density, open stool, and salt ionization has a negative relationships, and the other variables has positive relationships according to our GLR model. Yes, our residuals of the diarrhea prevalence of the under 5 are spatial clusters. We was expecting this result. The SGWR and GWR and MGWR model comparisons, we found the best model in the MGWR model. You can see 0.86 accuracy. Yes, this is our MGWR model results. This method calculates the significance of the districts. You can see 62% for breastfeed of the districts. This is our model goodness of fit. This MGWR method calculates local R-square map for the goodness of fit. Yes, this is our MGWR model results. You can see our results. Pink colors represents the positive relationships in the districts. Blue colors represents the negative relationships about the diarrhea prevalence. For example, FIVA among children, positive relationship in the entire Pakistan districts. For example, open stool has a negative relationships in the whole Pakistan, but northern areas has not significant values. These are our bivariate maps results. This mapping method calculates the like S-star map, calculates the beta values and variable values. You can see blue colors, for example, Peshawar in the variable 2 map. Peshawar region has high values in terms of beta values and variable values. By the way, our paper has a minor revision from a geography journal. I hope it will publish in next month. You can read some detailed explanations. Yes, discussion methods, discussion section. The relationship between diarrhea rates in children. Vitamin A supplements, salt ionization, temperature, premature birth, ARI, FIVA, and rural population are consistent with literature using our GLR model. The relationship between diarrhea rates in children under 5 years of age and open stool or population density breastfeed are inconsistent with the literature. Open defecation, vitamin A supplementation, and salt ionization reduce diarrhea prevalence. These factors have been shown to reduce diarrhea prevalence, aligning with global research. Breastfeeding, high temperature, premature births, ARI, fever, and rural population increase diarrhea risk in Pakistan. MGWR discussion. Different districts show varying relationship with diarrhea determinants. Especially central districts have a strong link between premature births and diarrhea. Breastfeeding is a significant factor in diarrhea prevalence in over half of the country. We have 3 recommendations for policymakers. Our findings provides enhanced nutritional programs, expand vaccination coverage, improve sanitation and water access. Future research conduct longitudinal studies to evaluate the long-term impact of targeted interventions. Explore additional socio-environmental factors using nonlinear methods like random forest, to capture complex relationships. By the way, we can provide our model results as a geographic data sets for the further studies for your. Yes, conclusions. Diarrhea in children under 5 varies significantly across Pakistan due to local factors like nutrition, environment, and socioeconomics. You can conduct longitudinal studies and use advanced spatial models to refine strategies and policies. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for that comprehensive paper. The next paper is about enhancing the mixed surveys with satellite images and ethnographic evidence, a case study for Vietnam. That's really two ends of the same scale.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
So please introduce yourself.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure being here. Are you enjoying the conference? Really nice, right? I love machine learning. Yeah. You're going to see some more of machine learning here and deep learning. So, my name is Rolando Gonzalez. I am a Marie Sklobodowska-Curie Fellow at the University of Groningen. I am also part of the International Union of Nutritional Sciences, and I also work for Oxford University as a researcher at the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative. So, what I'm going to talk about today is about the project I'm doing at Groningen, and it's about this was funded by the European Commission, and the goal of the project is to develop tools for monitoring the SDGs and trying to find children that are particularly vulnerable. And how are we going to do this? Well, the first part is to combine surveys with satellite images, and also we are going to apply machine learning and deep learning to identify vulnerable children. With a special focus on nutrition, because nutrition is a very important issue, as you can see in the UNICEF graphic there. And also, we are going to use ethnographic evidence. So we're going to have 3 parts there, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So this is the mixed survey for Vietnam. And the only interesting thing I want to show you here is that Central Highlands is a particularly interesting region, deprived in many senses because of higher levels of diarrhea, fever, low functioning. Also, the early childhood development index is the lowest in that region. WASH is also not so good. So this is showing that there are regional disparities that need to be taken into account. And the problem is that normally you don't have all the information to do this regional analysis and really go deep down into the regions and capture the difference. And we think that satellite images and remote sensing can help with that. For example, luminosity is a proxy of the economic situation, and you can see how it has changed over the years in Vietnam around Ho Chi Minh. And we also think that this can capture other things, like, for example, the double burden of malnutrition, because urbanization has been related to the consumption of oil, sweeteners, and processed foods, which increase obesity, but at the same time are not nutritious in principle. So that's the whole idea of using satellite images. And the other part is use ethnographic evidence, and this is because surveys and satellite images, you see, you are focusing on the aggregates, right? But ethnographic methods, in turn, they look for special cases. So we seek to capture those that could be left behind during the development process. Okay, that's the goal of the ethnographic part. And it's going to be special because it's going to be enhanced with large language models, you know, ChatGPT, for example. And what I'm looking for is to apply human AI cooperation, but specifically, I want to explore possibilities for human AI symbiosis, mutualism or commensalism, or ectosymbiosis, ideally framed on the World Health Organization and the UNICEF dietary diversity score, trying to understand which factors at multiple levels, spatial, household, and individual level, can affect and can influence the life of children. So this is what we have so far. So far we have developed a Bayesian multi-level machine learning and deep learning algorithm to identify which spatial, household, and child level factors affect malnutrition and multidimensional child growth. So this is the core of the pipeline. So this is something that we already have. So I am not going to go through the equations. I just want to highlight that it has a multi-level approach. So basically, I start at the spatial level, and through Bayes' theorem, I go conditioning. I go to the household level based on what is relevant at the spatial level, and then I go to the child level based on what is important at the household and the spatial level. So it's a conditional model, and the idea behind it is that, well, I use machine learning, all these models, random forest, multi-layer perceptrons, stochastic gradient classifiers, boosting, support vector machines, but more importantly, deep learning, because deep learning is really powerful, okay? More powerful than machine learning. So I use deep learning with real activation functions and two regularizers, and only I do that to elicit the prior, okay? So what is important for childhood stunting, from all the variables that I have, I use machine learning for that. So someone very smartly was asking, so what about machine learning? What is adding, okay? So what is interesting is that the focus of machine learning is on prediction. So we are now not only looking for what is explaining stunting, we pretty much know what is explaining stunting, but what can be helpful to predict and thus anticipate and thus apply prevention policies for stunting. That is the machine learning part. And then I use Bayesian model averaging to identify the most important determinants of child growth. I mix both through Bayes' theorem. That's the evidence I have from surveys and satellite images. And then I do the same with the ethnographic part to add more evidence to the results. So that's the intuition behind it. Those are the equations again. I am not going to go through that. I just want to highlight that this Bayesian multi-level approach is based on the ecobiological approach of Dahlgren Whitehead model in medicine, the approach of our task force of the International Union of Nutritional Sciences, and also the World Health Organization and Lancet Commission. The idea of these approaches is that it's not only about the physical factors, but also about the non-physical factors that can affect stunting. Okay, there are many factors that can affect stunting at multiple levels, at child level, at household level, and also at spatial or environmental level. So that's the idea behind it. So I don't have the UNICEF mixed GPS. We are all looking forward to have that data, right? So this is just a proof of concept of what can be done based on the Young Life Survey data. So I mix the Young Life Survey data with satellite images. So I have 200-ish potential explanatory variables of stunting and child growth. And I am showing the case for Vietnam. I have 7 spatial variables based on satellite images, the vegetation index, luminosity, the landslide risk. We have seen that is very important. Climate change disasters really affect the situation of children. And also I have one geographical variable that is fish production, really relevant in the case of Vietnam. And you can see the landslide risk there based on the Sentinel-2 images of the satellite. And this is also the luminosity. You can see the luminosity here, how it's different for the different regions that I am analyzing. So I'm calculating the polygons for these regions, and then I mix this with the survey data. You can see there from which satellites I am using the information, and then I categorize that for each of the Sentinel sites where the surveys were collected. These are the results. Basically using these 200-ish variables, and after running all the algorithm that includes Bayesian machine learning and deep learning, and selects the variables that are related to stunting and child growth, what the algorithm shows, because this is a data-driven exercise, is that rural regions have a higher risk, if you want, of having low child growth and stunting. Nothing new there. Natural disasters, this is interesting. Of course, it affects, because it affects food availability. Low fish production, very important for Vietnam. Luminosity, because it's a proxy of economic situation. Low mother's BMI. Yeah, we more or less know that. The ethnic group of the mother, interesting. How much children are in the household? The health of children compared to other peers, low verbal development, no attendance to preschool. So another question that was coming up today is, so what? What's the relevance for policy? So maybe, in this case, this is just a proof of concept, but I will say, for example, that if you are looking to prevent stunting, you can also look for which children are not attending preschool, which children have low verbal development, as this can be a proxy that maybe in the future, because don't forget that machine learning is about predicting the future, right? So maybe in the future, these children can have problems, can have low child growth, or can suffer stunting. These are the full machine learning results, just for the technical people here. Yeah, I'm going to finish soon. So some people have been analyzing stunting. Be careful with that, because it's imbalance. Okay, so you have to use special metrics as the, you cannot use the accuracy, you have to use the precision recall accuracy. So you can see the results there. The false omission rate, I'm just going to talk about this very quickly. So it's more important in the case of machine learning to have a low false omission rate, because that means that you are not going to exclude children that could have a stunt. That could be stunted. When you're preventing, when you're predicting, the idea is to have a low false omission rate, so that's why I included that. These are the results at house. These were the results at the spatial level. So the rural region, luminosity, droughts in the community. These are the results at household level. Food expenditure per capita, nothing new there. Well, that shows that my algorithm works, yeah. The children that were born before, the lack of parents' education, some things are interesting there. And at child level, verbal development, the health compare, the attendance to preschool, so something that I showed before. So what is the conclusion of this? This is still work in progress. Bayesian, spatial machine learning and deep learning methods, it seems that they are helpful to identify which spatial, household, and child level variables are related to multidimensional child growth and stunting. But we think that that's not enough. We think that ethnographic studies can further improve these results and show which ones can be left behind during the development process. So what we are going to do next is to do some ethnographic field work in Vietnam. I'm going to be doing some childcare volunteer program in Ho Chi Minh. I want to integrate, of course, mixed GPS. I am looking forward to that database. And also spatial contiguity matrices in the algorithm and microsimulations. And I'm finishing with this because some people were asking this morning, okay, so what's new? Isn't it better just to use this machine learning? The problem is that everything is uniform. Yes, but we can control for that. There is no reason to not mix machine learning with spatial geographical methods. And this is something that I did in another paper where I apply spatial machine learning, so you can see the contiguity between regions there. I mix that with the machine learning models, and then I can classify and I can differentiate the regions based on unsupervised learning in this case. So this is something that I did for targeting the poorest, proximity testing, but the idea is to do this also for stunting and child growth. So thank you very much.
Okay, so that was an amazing hectic paper. We have our last paper now, which is also on machine learning. We are really going through deep technical work here, using machine learning to understand the effectiveness of cash transfers in conflict settings. So it's nice to see machine learning used for something really important rather than just helping students write bad essays.
Hello everyone, thanks so much for staying until now. I have the difficult task of keeping all of you awake and myself as well. So, well, first of all, this is a very exploratory work that we have been doing along with some colleagues that are here, William Rodgard, Oliver Fiala, and other colleagues. My name is Hernando Grueso, I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oxford. I'm new to the machine learning world, very interested in it, so keep that in mind. Again, this is very exploratory. I welcome all the questions, especially the harsh ones, because those are the ones that I need and will help me. So, well, full disclosure, we have another paper where we use an instrumental variables approach to estimate the effect of conflict on children in Nigeria. And then we thought we need to do some robustness checks. And there's this fancy machine learning tool called causal forests. When we replicated the results using causal forests, we say like, wait a second, this is also useful for other things. So causal forest in itself is a really helpful method, and I'll talk a little bit about it in a second, but it's really good to dip a little bit into heterogeneous effects and to understand who benefits the most out of social protection, who are the most affected or the most vulnerable social groups in conflict zones, and so on. So briefly, just a motivation. There's already some research around the negative effect of armed conflict on children's food security, and there's evidence from Nigeria using fixed effects models and multi-level models, and from Ethiopia as well. There's also negative effects, research on the negative effect of conflict on school attendance, but there's very limited evidence on social protection. So far, most people have used DHS to do this type of research. And I want to thank the mixed team and especially to Nazim for sharing the geocodes with us. Thanks to that, we were able to, for the first time, we think, to look at the effectiveness or to approach the effectiveness of social protection in the case of conflict zones in Nigeria. There's one study we found really interesting, looking at something similar in the case of Yemen. So yeah, that's our contribution. And here, we are looking at how to use machine learning to get a better understanding on who are those most affected of conflict in Nigeria. So we use 3 data sources here, MIG6, geocoded. The Uppsala conflict data program has this amazing database. I think it's based on news records on violent attacks. We put that together also with satellite data on soil moisture that we extracted from NASA through the Google Earth engine. And thanks to the geocodes, we managed to put things together. Looking at 2020, 2021, so it's cross-sectional, focused on Nigeria. Here's the tricky part, and I know some of you might start criticizing this research from this angle, but I will tell you a little bit of why we are doing this. We are using a subsample, looking at those areas of the country with an average soil moisture below the national average. The reason why is because we tried to understand the effect of conflict on children, and we realized there are many different types of conflicts in Nigeria. The one we care about was really correlated with droughts. And we have another paper that I've been mentioning, using an instrumental variable to do that. And then we realized if we want to dip a little bit into the reality of that type of conflict in drought settings, we need to create this restriction and to dip a little bit into what are the characteristics of those living in these areas. I'm happy to come back and chat a little bit more about that, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to move on into the methods and the results. So we are using causal forests that are, let's say, like kind of like a second version of random forest, but applied to causal inference. And the main treatment that we are using here are households living in conflict zones that we define as those in a radius of 5 kilometers of at least one violent event that resulted in at least one fatality during the last 2 years. Why 5 kilometers? Yeah, that's a good question. So the geocodes are not precise, they are anonymized, and they're moved like in urban areas within 2 kilometers, in rural areas within 5 kilometers. So we started with 5 kilometers, and we tested with 6, with 7, and it's a little bit of the same story, but we thought that this was the closest we could get into the proximity of those households and the location of the violent event. So we have the distance in time, but also the distance from this 5 kilometers radius, if you want. We explored the heterogeneous effects on whether a household received any of these 3 different programs. So we have 2 different cash transfers in the mixed survey, and also receiving a retirement pension. And the main outcome we are looking at here is school attendance. We did something similar with food insecurity, but I'm going to focus on this one in this case. And we use some controls of individual characteristics. And yeah, I briefly mentioned this about the geocodes. Now, some context about Nigeria. There's conflict across the country, but we are mainly focused in this part of the country. This is the story of Boko Haram that started its operations around like 2009, 2010. And interestingly, correlates a lot with the areas of the country with the lowest levels of soil moisture. In the northeast part of the country, you will see the highest concentration of violent events during 2020. But this map doesn't change much since 2013. You see kind of like this distribution of conflict. Now, just to make sure we're on the same page. So the red dots are locations of violence events during 2020, and the yellow parts are like the areas that we think are affected by drought or with the lowest levels of soil moisture in the country. So we are focused on that overlap, the yellow areas and the red dots to filter the type of conflict that we care about in this story. Now, I'm gonna go quickly on this, and as I said, I'm very new to this, but what we do here is to try to replicate OLS results that we have estimated before in this IV approach, but using this random forest that starts with this honesty principle, that is basically we split the data in 2, we train the algorithm with a random sample of the data, and then we test that with the part that hasn't been used to train the algorithm. Then we build these 3 structures to predict an outcome, in this case, school attendance. And what it does is to try to maximize the difference in the outcome. So if the greatest differences are like between females and males, it will focus on that, and it will create different decision trees and group them to create this kind of like forest approach. And at the end, we're talking about predicted causality, and we can dip into the philosophical discussion on whether or not this is causal. I don't want to go there, but we realize that this has another value, and is that this conditional average treatment effect is really good to get a look of which subgroups of the population get very different like stories in this same type of setting. So that's what we are doing here. So this is the main result we start with, which estimates the negative effect of living in a conflict zone on school attendance. it reduces school attendance in approximately 3 percentage points. And we start with this story to try to get an idea of who are those most affected by conflict in this part of the world. So what you see here are segments of the population, and here's the absolute value of the average treatment effect, or the predicted conditional average treatment effect. So first, we want to know who are those most affected that are are in this segment of the population. And as I said, this is very exploratory. So on average, we see that the age distribution is a little bit skewed to the left, so the younger segment of the population seem to be the most affected. There's a little bit of an even distribution, but mostly men seem to be affected, which is consistent with the literature because men get recruited and also killed during conflict. I'm going to rush a little bit. There's an even distribution between rural and urban areas, and this part we are still trying to understand why there's kind of like almost like a normal distribution in terms of the wealth index. You will expect that the poorest segment of the population is the most affected. Now, we restrict only the same analysis to conflict zones, and we find that those receiving social protection actually see an improvement in terms of school attendance. So we look at who are those who benefit the most from social protection in conflict zones. We see kind of like a similar distribution, although adolescents start to kind of like appear also here in the map. This is really interesting. Mainly boys and adolescent boys are the ones who benefit the most from living in a household receiving some sort of social protection. Mainly people living in rural areas. Same wealth distribution, which is puzzling. And then we focused on who benefits the least from social protection if you live in a conflict zone. And you see kind of like an inverse type of distribution of age here. The youngest, but also kind of like the last segment of the population still attending school. Again, females benefit the least, which I think is an interesting area to deep in and explore further why this happens in people living in rural areas. This makes a little bit more sense if you're at the right side of the wealth distribution. Getting social protection might not make a big change in your situation, so perhaps there are other reasons why school attendance is affected in your case. Yeah, just to summarize here, the most vulnerable groups to the negative effects of conflict on school attendance in Nigeria are children, particularly those living in urban and rural areas, with males being the most affected. And within conflict zones, adolescent males in rural areas appear to benefit the most from cash transfers. We see that girls and young females in rural areas seem to experience the least positive impact of cash transfers in terms of school attendance. We think this is an interesting new tool that can be added into the regular types of analysis. I don't think this is going to replace the regular tools we have for causal inference, but can help us to complement and to get a different angle of the story. I think it's interesting to try to understand on why cash transfers might benefit more boys than girls, and I think this can be like another area of research. So that's needed for sure, and I really like how the previous presentation brought up the idea of incorporating ethnography here, and I think we will need something like that here to go into the ground and better understand the situation. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks so much.
Okay, they were four extremely interesting and extremely technical papers. We started a bit late, so I'm going to allow about 10 minutes for questions, so I hope you'll bear with me. We'll finish slightly late. Are there any questions for any of the four speakers? Okay.
Thank you all for presenting. It was super interesting. I have a question for the third presentation. So we learned through this machine learning process. So a big list of predictors of something, but I would like to know more on if this machine learning, if these predictors are more stable within region or within time. Is it the same predictors across different regions, or is it the same predictors for that region over time? So I would like to know about this. For this paper, and then on the last one, I also have a question. Well, I have a comment. So you find that in conflict affects school attendance. Social protection programs help much more school attendance for boys only. And I would like to know a bit more on the baseline level. So is it because daughters were already not going to school, and so even if social protection comes, they still don't go? Or is it that they were going to school while boys were not going to school because of the conflict, and then social protection helps them going to school? Yes, that's all. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Yes, the spatio-temporal part is not yet implemented, so this is only a cross-section of a survey in 1 year. So we cannot see the difference between years, but we should expect that this difference should change on time, maybe not every year, but in general we should expect some heterogeneity over time, at least in the case of Vietnam, because it has been through a lot of changes through these years. And in terms of regional differences, no, that's the thing with these algorithms. You only are capturing the general trends over all regions, but if you really want to capture the differences specific to each region, we think that that's ethnography that has to go there and really see, okay, what is special about this region? What is special about this culture? What is special about these people? So that's why we want to complement the aggregate results with these bottom-up micro-level results. Thank you very much.
Can I ask the four speakers to come up so the people online can actually see them? I'm sure they'll appreciate that. And you'll also be able to see the questions as they come up online as well. There's one for you there. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thanks so much for that question, and I think that's a key question, actually. So it's cross-section on the data we are using, so we don't have a real baseline here. But we looked at the distribution of school attendance outside conflict zones, and there's no a big difference. In conflict zones, you start to see kind of a gender difference, and when you look at those households getting social protection, then you see a greater gap. So I think it's suggestive, it's cross-sectional, we cannot conclude anything here. We wonder if there are any gender norms that can be explaining this, but I think this is an area for future research, and yeah, I don't have a clear answer, but that's a key question. Thank you.
There's a question for you online as well. So why you find the wealth index of richer households are not doing as well as you'd expect?
Yeah, so that's an interesting, yeah, thanks for mentioning that. So this is what we thought. When you try to understand those who benefit the most from social protection, then it looks like the richest segment of the population still living in conflict zones are those who benefit the most. I think it makes sense in the sense that if those who are at the higher spectrum of the wealth index get additional income, you will think maybe there's another reason why, unrelated to income, obstructing your access to education. It can be problem with infrastructure, maybe the school was bombed, maybe you're afraid, maybe there's some sort of emotional distress, and getting a cash transfer might not make a big difference here, but perhaps for the poorer segments of the population, there are other reasons, and maybe getting a cash transfers can make a difference in those cases. Again, this is machine learning. We are trying to kind of like dig into why some groups have different predicted average treatment effects. We are guessing on why we're getting some of these results. I think you are spotting something very important there with that question. Yeah, I don't have a better answer, but thanks for pointing that out. Yeah.
Okay.
I just have a clarification question for presenter 4. The question that you use drop out or not studying. And in that case, you know, what I'm thinking is, how did you match that the attack was before the person was not in school already?
Yes, it's linked to that for you, Hernando. In terms of, if social protection measures are meant to be targeting and hitting the worst off in society, might you, I'm just trying to think of the direction of the relationship, would not looking at those people who'd never been to school but were getting these things show you whether or not they were hitting the places they needed to get to? So it's a flipping of it in terms of, yes, everyone's getting to school, but who are those whose schools have been destroyed, who aren't able to access it, but are still able to get those things? Everything is facing the same direction, yeah, in terms of social protection measures going to those who don't really need them because they're already in school or in the top quintile. Yeah. Just one question regarding the stunting analyses that have been done. I mean, we through much of the 90s and early 2000s, there was a lot of mentioning about hand washing and the relationships to things, but I didn't see hand washing mentioned anywhere. Is there a reason why other variables that we know to be associated with malnutrition, such as number of households sharing a toilet, number of members' household, overcrowding, people sharing those toilets, all of these mud floors, whether or not you have a mud floor in your house and a child aged 1 or 2 learning to walk and then putting their hand to their mouth, that's what's going to be driving dysentery, that's what's going to be driving malnutrition. Are these, for me, self-evident elements being part of these models? Are they helping explain things as well? And the last thing was with regards to the Pakistan data and the admirable attempts to bring everything together. You mentioned that you'd normalize the weights by linking it to the 2017 census. Are you controlling for age and gender in terms of those when you do it, or is it just the overall, the aggregate figure? Because might it refine things if it was, say, 5-year age groups and gender rather than just recalibrating to the provincial or national rates there?
Just one quick question for the first presentation. I think maybe linked to that methods and some of the uncertainty is, just thinking that you aggregated each of the samples and then pooled the samples. So that was aggregated at the state level, but could you, if they're representative at a lower level than that, could you actually, rather than grouping them and then grouping them as 4, group the lower level in the pooled estimate? That would give you a bit more certainty, and it would just give you a slightly larger sample size in that pooled estimate. That was just a thought that I had in terms of methods, but I think it's a really, really interesting approach.
Okay, do the speakers want to come up and answer the questions?
I can quickly answer one of the questions. Yeah, thanks so much for pointing out school attendance versus dropout. So we have school attendance. Here's the thing. In conflict zones, there are high levels of attrition. Human displacement is a big issue. A lot of people get killed. So we try to do the same exercise using, there are 2 questions in mix. One, whether you're attending school during the current year or in the past year, and we try to estimate or to calculate dropout rates, and then we lost a lot of observations. And we think it's because of that. It's because we are dealing with a conflict zone. So we decided to use school attendance as the best guess, and we noticed that there's like a difference in average levels of school attendance, suggesting that there's something there, but it's not perfect. We are missing part of the story, and we think in part it's because of human displacement, but yeah, you're absolutely right to point that out. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Yes. As part of the 200 potential explanatory variables, there was wash variables, many of them related to toilet and any of them. But the algorithm did not choose them as the most important ones. So, but having said that, nothing prevents the algorithm to be modified based on theory. So remember that this is machine learning and it's an inductive method. So it's not deductive where you start with theory and then you build the model. But there's, in the Bayesian part, there's nothing that prevents that. So right now the priors are elicited with machine learning, but can also be elicited with theory or with expert criteria. So if I know that this has to be important in the model, I can assign a huge prior, and then when combined with the data through Bayes' theorem, I can see if it is the case or not. So it is possible, but right now it's not the way that the algorithm works. Right now the algorithm works with a prior elicitation based on machine learning and deep learning. Having said that, it's also the case that the results are conditional on the data. So you cannot really generalize this to be, oh, this is, stunting is related to this. No, stunting is related to this, conditional on that data for that year, for that regions, for that sample. So it's really a case study if you want. So you cannot really generalize to the general causes of stunting. So that's the long answer if you want. Thank you very much for noticing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the question. For the control by gender and age group, we didn't do it. This is as an answer for you. But I don't think that is going to change on the estimate. This is something that I can ensure that for you. On the idea of pulling and adding, I think this is maybe something that we can explore as well. We didn't do it. But as I said, this conference is a matter of gathering as much as we can as feedback to be able to enhance and improve this piece of paper. Thank you.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Can we thank all four speakers for such fascinating and really complex and detailed